Good afternoon, everybody. So, last video, the channel update thing, I threw out an invitation for a Q&A sort of thing at the end, and, I'm not super popular in this space, so we got one or two questions, which is fine. I didn't really expect much out of anything. Thank you if you ask something. So, in the roundup for all this, I do want to answer some questions. I figured I'd go back and pull questions I've been asked, not just there, but in other videos across various Reddit threads when I've advertised what I'm doing, and stuff like that. I've definitely answered all of these before, but I figure having one little area for all of them is pretty good, so let's start. So the first question that I should answer, obviously, is when is the next episode of The Looming Shadow? I had some stuff to take care of. Like I said, there's going to be a little break between episodes 1 and 2, but work on it is currently progressing quite smoothly. I'm aiming to have all the scenes built and shot by the end of this month, so then it'll be another week or two of post-production. Sometime in August is my current goal, plus or minus any life events. How did I get into StarCraft stuff? And this is a long answer, so strap in. So I've always been into StarCraft basically ever since it came out. It and Unreal Tournament were my go-to after-school games, and I've just kind of been obsessed with it for a long time. I would even make little narrative maps back then, playing around with as much of the trigger system in StarCraft 1 as I could wrap my head around at the time, and I made some things that I'm sure weren't really impressive, but definitely were entertaining for me as a little kid. As far as StarCraft 2, I initially tried to get into the editor back in 2010 when Wings of Liberty released, but it was a bit much at the time, and there wasn't a lot of documentation available. Back then I had already been pretty deep into teaching myself the Unreal Tournament 2004 editor for a couple of years, and I didn't have the brain power to juggle another thing like it. And this is kind of a roundabout way of answering the question, but I actually missed out on Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void when they first came out. I had just recently moved around when the second game dropped, and the whole thing just threw me for a loop that took a while to recover from. When Legacy of the Void came out, I was in a bit of a better position, so I bought both, played through, and actually just hated how Legacy of the Void ended, so I kind of put StarCraft 2 back down for a while. But about a year or so later, I mentioned to a coworker that I'd played through it, and we talked a bit about the games, and made me look back on what was going on. Around that time, the first third of Nova Covert Ops was out, so I made a note to check it out once it all released, and that was it for a little while longer. Then, when I was house-sitting a couple of years later, I spent the week replaying the then-complete StarCraft 2 series, and it inspired me to poke around the editor the same way that I used to when I was a kid with StarCraft 1. I jotted down some notes about things I'd like to do, looked into it a little bit, and then just got distracted. So then, my friend and frequent feature on the channel, Skelzor, had just been wrapping up a Let's Play series of all the Halo games. I mentioned that previously. And since so many of my negative comments towards those games had involved StarCraft, I figured it would make a natural candidate for the next batch of videos. Unfortunately, some life stuff got in the way, and that never really came to pass, but something I had planned did. See, because it was going to be me, a veteran of the series, walking him, a newcomer, through, my plan was to make little vignettes to introduce each race as we went through the campaigns, one before the Terran campaign, one before the Zerg, one before the Protoss. So that's when I finally started teaching myself the editor, not to make maps, but to make little snippets of machinima. I made 2 of these before the series got canned, but I didn't want to throw away all the work I'd done. Because, I'll be honest, learning everything I did from a totally blank starting point was pretty hard, and it took a long time. And if the premise of all that sounds familiar, yeah, it's the History of the Races videos. Given that the view count of our previous Let's Play videos only sometimes reached the double digits, I never expected the overwhelming and honestly kind of terrifying popularity they've enjoyed. But doing all of that, I found out that I kind of liked seeing how far I could push the editor and what I could make it do, so I kept on, and here we are. Why the StarCraft 2 editor? Why not something like Source Filmmaker? At the time, when the History of the Races videos were just supposed to be little companion pieces to a larger project, there were two things driving my decision. One, I thought it would be cute to have StarCraft 1's history represented by stuff in StarCraft 2. And two, the editor is built for handling StarCraft, so what better place to put it? It has all the units, all the models, all the behaviors and the commands, the lighting. I don't have to supply anything of my own, and I don't have to learn how to rip models. Now, as I've gone on to do more complicated things, and seriously, the history of videos are almost quaint compared to what I do now, the argument is a weaker one. Source Filmmaker would probably save me a lot of time and a headache, or just Blender, but I'm here and I know what I'm doing well enough to keep doing it. And, like I said before, I really enjoy seeing what I can get this thing to do. It was never built for this, but it does have all the parts to make it work. It's tough, and it sure does take a lot of time, but it's just fun. It's like solving a puzzle every time I have a new idea. I love seeing all these scenes come together, and I'd go so far as to say that I'm almost getting good at it. And something I've seen a couple times is people being kind of unbelieving that, wait, this is all done with the trigger system? Yup. I don't use the cutscene editor. Nope. Well, why the hell not? Because I don't know how. It's a personal failing at this point, but I've never looked into it. Maybe it's easier, maybe it's harder, but there's just so much inside of it that still doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and you know what? That's fine. It doesn't have to. Is this a good answer? I don't know. What's up with those two original shorts? Yeah, they're kinda silly, right? So they're both actually just little experiments I did after getting done with the History of the Races. See, when I was making those, I basically made a scene or two for each section of the entry in the manual. They were very simple, pretty short things. I recorded each one, trimmed it as necessary, and stuck it over my narration. The two shorts, Hostile Ground and Recovery and Cleanup, were my first real attempts at stringing longer sequences of triggers together. My goal was to see what would actually be possible inside, say, a regular StarCraft 2 mission. And I've told this story before, but one of the things I remember very vividly about the marketing of StarCraft 2 before Wings of Liberty's release was someone at Blizzard saying that their new engine would allow them to have complex cutscenes right inside the game, and even the maps themselves. Growing up with StarCraft 1, where the most complex it got was some dropships appearing from off-screen and moving in a straight line, this comment made me very excited. Remember, I started off making little narrative maps. So StarCraft 2 comes out, and all the cutscenes are special segments removed from the maps using special models, and the most complex you get during gameplay is something like a dropship appearing from off-screen and moving in a straight line. What I wanted to do is prove that their original promise could actually be done. And in case it wasn't clear, both of those videos are one single unbroken event. They start with a unit moving onto a trigger region, and they run straight until the end. I added Foley and music and voices after the fact, but all that stuff is actually also doable inside the game itself if someone was so inclined. So yeah, that's what's up with those. They're silly, they're cheesy, but this is StarCraft. And they were good practice. Something else I see a lot, hey, you got X thing wrong in History of the... I appreciate your enthusiasm, but every word I said in those videos was directly from the StarCraft 1 manual. If anything's changed since 1998, take it up with Blizzard. And congrats if you can get them to talk about StarCraft these days. A very reasonable question I've actually gotten more than once. Why don't you use the classic hatchery skin in the StarCraft 1 videos when you use all the other throwback skins? And that's a fair question. Blizzard has put a good handful of classic unit skins in the game, as well as the classic HQ building skins, like the hatchery and the command center and the Nexus. Most of them look pretty good. Unfortunately, the hatchery doesn't. It's really ugly. Just, it is not up to the same level of quality as the rest. It looks like a rough draft. It just doesn't have the same detail, and the textures are all really low resolution. It's bad enough in-game, but scaled up to the proper size for one of these videos? Ugh. And also, personal note, coming from me, the classic Zealot skin, also awful. It looks nothing like the classic Zealot. Where are his big loopy shoulder pads? Come on. What's next after the Looming Shadow? I have very little idea. I'd love to keep doing these sorts of things, but here's the deal. History of? Like I said, they were short little vignettes of existing material. Dark Origin? Kind of the same thing, a great chance to expose people to an obscure part of the first game and building off an existing map. The Looming Shadow? Same thing again, just there's more of it. It's an entire 5-mission campaign. But what do I do next? There are a handful of other StarCraft 1 campaigns that technically exist within the canon, or at least haven't been outright dismissed yet, and those might seem like the obvious choice. But that represents a big problem. The Looming Shadow has already represented an immense amount of work and time investment, and that's just these 5 very simple missions. I don't really know if I have it in me to do another thing like this, but longer and more complicated. Especially not just as a hobby project. It's a lot of pressure to make these good, I'm not gonna lie. I've found more success doing these videos than I ever expected, and I'm immensely grateful for the support, but it does come with its own set of expectations, right? To get things done in a timely manner, to push the boundaries of what I'm putting out. I'm not saying that I'm tearing my hair out over getting part 2 and 3 of Looming Shadow out to you guys, but I am holding myself to getting certain amounts of work done at certain times. Putting an even bigger project ahead of me doesn't seem like the best idea. And looking past just these sorts of videos, there's some reviews and essays I want to put together. I have stuff I'm dying to say about StarCraft's storytelling and narrative presentation. I want to talk more about Dark Souls. I want to tell everybody about how good Unreal is. But there's also stuff off YouTube that I want to focus on. Another hobby of mine is miniature painting and art. You know, I've got a science fiction trilogy I wrote, and I'd like to start writing something new. So, we'll see. And that does bring me to the next point, a question I've gotten a lot, and more than I ever expected. How can I support you? I've been on the internet a pretty long time at this point, and I'm still kind of blown away at how rapidly we as dwellers of it took to the idea of just handing money directly to the people making the stuff we like. I think it's great that so many people have been able to make a living or supplement themselves by just enjoying their hobby and sharing it with other people. But it does come with its own pitfalls. Even though it's a pretty novel concept we're talking about, money is still money. It makes sense that the people giving it expect something in return. And that's why I've resisted the Patreon thing. Nothing about what I'm doing right now on this channel can be done fast enough to keep up with a monthly delivery expectation, or at least not with the other things I've got going on. And that would just put more of that sort of pressure back on me, and I don't want to start sweating so much over something I tinker with for fun. But I've heard you, and I appreciate it. From now on, there'll be a PayPal donation link in all the videos should you find that necessary. If you choose to do it, I cannot thank you enough. Just the thought of it is more than I ever expected. And hey, I mentioned that I've got a sci-fi trilogy. You could always buy those. I don't get a ton from them, but if you read them and leave an honest review, that tells Amazon that they should show them to more people. Each new reader is another chance that they or Netflix picks up the series for 3/4 of a season before canceling it as a tax write-off, and what else could I ask for? Next question, and this is not something I've gotten before, but more of an advertisement. I'm putting words in your mouth. Hey, I have a custom map and or campaign that I'd like a short cutscene made for. Can I hire you? Absolutely. This I will accept money for readily. Get in touch. The email in my About page is correct. It should be on the screen right now for business inquiries. Just put something relevant in the title or I probably won't even notice. Use the word StarCraft. My eyes will snap right to it. And, well, I guess that kinda does it. Okay. Bye, everyone. Take care of yourselves. The next video is going to be episode 2. Don't worry. Hope you've enjoyed the little look at the creation process. It's going by very quickly, but not in real life, so keep that in mind. See ya!